What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some sell-high players heading into week 6 of the NFL season. So I just think these guys have overachieved either to start off the season or over the last couple of weeks. I think it's better to move off of them sooner rather than later. Maybe there's an injury that's allowed them to produce. Maybe they've had a different quarterback, but for whatever reason, I do think it would be beneficial to sell high on these players. If you guys enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe. Any questions, drop them down below. But let's dive right into my first sell high player. And I believe I talked about Michael Pittman last week also. We went out in week 5, got to see another productive game with Joe Flacco at quarterback. He went 5 for 37 and a touchdown. Week 4, he went 6 for 113. And this is not anti-Michael Pittman. I just don't think Anthony Richardson can support these weapons, at least not to a level that, we're excited about for fantasy. And it's not like this is an offense where maybe there's questionable quarterback play, but Michael Pittman is like the clear-cut top guy. He's the only relevant option. This is turning into like a sneaky good wide receiver room here. You have Michael Pittman, who's established. You have Josh Downs, here in year 2, back-to-back strong games. He looks legit. You have Alec Pierce, who has been a crazy effective deep threat. Like, I don't think it's super sustainable, but I mean, he has been a legit weapon for them so far this season. And then you have Adonai Mitchell, who maybe hasn't, converted in terms of the production, but he's a great route runner. He's getting open. He's commanding targets, just hasn't really, converted in those limited opportunities. But this is a solid wide receiver room. You also have Jonathan Taylor, in that backfield. So they're going to spread the ball around a little bit. There's not going to be a ton of passing volume. And we saw early on in the year, Michael Pittman was not producing with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. He had gone for under 40 yards in all 3 of the games where Richardson, logged full games. He has gone under 40 yards in 4 of the 5 total games. Like I said, 3 with Richardson. He didn't hit 8 PPR points in those 3 games with A-Rich at quarterback. So I just think this is a spot where I'd be looking to move off of Michael Pittman. He has the name value. He has the pass production. If you can flip him for a more stable, like wide receiver 3 play, I'm thinking a guy like a Rashid Shaheed, a Jordan Addison, someone in that range, a Jameson Williams. If you can get some of those guys, because maybe they're a little bit less proven than Michael Pittman, I do think they're going to be better options rest of season. Now, my next sell high is going to be at the tight end position, and I just think this is a great time to get off of Isaiah Likely here. He went out in week 5, 16.3 PPR points, 3 receptions for 13 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the volume was not there. Obviously the 2 touchdowns carried him fantasy-wise, but Likely has just not come close to matching his involvement that we saw in week 1, where he was targeted 12 times, caught 9 of them for 111 yards and a touchdown. Almost was 2 touchdowns, if he came away with that one where his toe was just a little bit out. But week 1, it looked like Isaiah Likely could be the number 2 target on this team, could be a great option moving forward. Since then, he has maxed out at 3 targets. He has 9 total targets in the last 4 weeks, and he has not hit 30 receiving yards in a game since week 1. It is concerning to me that in a game where Lamar Jackson attempts 42 passes, Isaiah Likely is only being targeted 3 times. He was also the tight end 3 in targets, so it's not even like he is the clear-cut tight end 1 at this point. Mark Andrews saw 5 targets. Kohler came out of nowhere, saw 4 targets, even though it was super limited routes, and was the second most productive pass catcher on this team, even though the dude was barely out there running routes. So this is just a gross tight end room at this point. It is a tight end by committee. The weekly floor for Isaiah Likely is unbelievably low. I think he has serious volume concerns moving forward. And I also just don't think the ceiling is all that high, because if you have no volume floor, you have these other tight ends that are involved, it's going to be tough to put together those high ceiling games. And this was like a great opportunity, a prime game for these pass catchers, because it was a competitive game script. They were trailing for moments of this game where they needed to be pass heavy. We've seen in the games where they're leading early on, they are totally cool just running the ball a million times a game, barely attempting passes. And he was still only commanding 3 targets in this great game script. So I feel like week 1, they came out, they didn't really use Mark Andrews. They caught people by surprise with Isaiah Likely. The Chiefs defense, they locked in on Mark Andrews because historically he had been their top weapon. Now teams pretty much know that Andrews is almost a non-factor at this point. I will say Andrews had like a fine game. If someone thinks like this is him starting to get going, I would also throw Andrews in here as like a sell high. Obviously, it's not selling super high because it's not like he had a great game, but he was under a 50% route participation. Mark Andrews looks like he's cooked. The usage is not getting better. I mean, it seems like the Ravens just think he's completely washed at this point. So I'm selling likely. I am selling Mark Andrews. If you can get a guy like a Tucker Kraft, that might be out of the range of outcomes at this point, but it's just this spot where you have this gross tier of tight end. If you can pivot off, either get someone in a similar tier, plus an upgrade at another position, or use it to try to bridge the gap into like that Trey McBride area at tight end, that is definitely something I would look into. Now we're going to go back to the wide receiver position, and I want to talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba. I was interested in JSN coming into the season. Don't know if I was, much higher on him than consensus, but I thought he was interesting. A top prospect, went into a crowded wide receiver room as a rookie, didn't do a ton, but showed some flashes. Could he go in and have that year two breakout? Through 5 weeks here, I'm kind of ready to move on if I can sell high on him. He's averaging 12.2 PPR points per game. He's coming off not a monster game, but 13.1 points, 4 receptions, 31 yards, and a touchdown. I just don't think there has been anything about JSN's usage that makes me feel like he has any sort of upside. Coming into week 5, he had a 21% target share that was 38th in the NFL, or at the wide receiver position. He had a 20.5% target rate that was 52nd at the wide receiver position. And then week 5, he's targeted 7 times on 40 pass attempts. Those numbers are going to drop. So he was kind of being targeted as like this, potential high volume guy on this good passing attack. I know he got into the end zone in week 5, but heading into that game, he had 1 total red zone target through 4 weeks. He's only averaging 1 deep target per game. He has the 70th highest ADOT, sitting around 8 yards. So he's not being used heavily in the red zone. The volume isn't anything to write home about. He's not being used down the field. Like, where is the upside coming from here with JSN? And the Seahawks are currently leading the NFL in pass attempts per game. If those pass attempts are coming down, it's going to get even worse here for JSN. So I just don't think there's much of an excuse here for JSN to not be playing better. Like, as a rookie, you had the excuse of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. He was the number 3. He is getting wide receiver 2 routes, and he's still just not getting it done at a high level. Like, is he playable week to week? Like, sure, he's a flex option, but I feel like people think he's this wide receiver 3. Maybe they think he has wide receiver 2 upside rest of season. I just don't know. Like, maybe he's a top 24 guy, but I feel like he's going to limp towards it. Maybe he gets lucky in the touchdown department, but I'm just not overly optimistic with him moving forward. So some potential targets that I'd be looking at here, trying to flip JSN. I think Jalen Waddle is super interesting. Talked about him as a buy low. He's been miserable without Tua, but if Tua's coming back after, the mandatory 4 games out, I think Jalen Waddle is going to easily outproduce him rest of season. I think Jamison Williams is fun. Rashid Shaheed, mentioned those guys also for Michael Pittman, but I think they also apply here as a trade target for JSN. And then another wide receiver I want to move off of is going to be Christian Kirk. He had a really rough start to the season. Through 2 weeks, he had put up 4.9 total PPR points. He has bounced back nicely over the past 3 weeks. Went 8 for 79 in week 3, 7 for 61 and a touchdown in week 4, and then 4 for 88 here in week 5. I just think when we're looking at the landscape of this Jaguars offense, their weapons here, Brian Thomas Jr. has, pulled away as the wide receiver 1. He has proven here that he is the alpha. He is going to be the top dog rest of season. Like 5 weeks in, I feel like everyone should be accepting that at this point. Christian Kirk's calling card throughout his career has been the volume. He can command a lot of volume. He's not going to be a huge touchdown guy. He's not going to be a huge big play guy. But in PPR, he can be an interesting option. They can give you a wide receiver 2 production. But we have Evan Ingram looking like he is going to return very shortly. And what did Evan Ingram do last year? He commanded volume, 8.4 targets per game. I think the return of Evan Ingram is going to greatly decrease the floor and the ceiling of Christian Kirk. If that volume's suffering, I don't think he's going to have the big plays, the touchdowns to kind of make up for it. So I would be looking to get off of Christian Kirk before we add Evan Ingram here. Like, Christian Kirk was fine last year with Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, but like Brian Thomas Jr. is better than Calvin Ridley, and he's only 5 games into his rookie year. He can continue to dominate here. So I just don't think there's upside. I'd be looking at some targets, Alad McConkey, Jordan Addison, Dontavian Wicks. For McConkey, just a rookie that I think can break out throughout the rest of the season, has already proven he's a good player. Jordan Addison, number 2 target on a good passing attack. And then Dontavian Wicks, maybe it's controversial. I just feel like this wide receiver room was wide open. I know he kind of flopped in his first real opportunity here as a clear top 2 wide receiver, but I think he'll be fine moving forward. He commands targets. Ball skills a little questionable, but the route running, the ability to command targets is definitely a top tier trait for him. So those are some potential trade targets. And then the final sell high player I have here, we're going back to the tight end position. It is going to be Kyle Pitts. He had not had a great start to the season. Through 4 weeks, it was looking rough, but then he goes out on primetime Thursday Night Football, has a really solid game, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 88 yards. He had an 84% route participation, which is definitely an improvement from previous weeks. That's solid usage at the tight end position, but he is still having an issue commanding targets at a high level. Through 5 weeks, he is averaging 3.8 targets per game. That is not getting it done. He's sitting at a 13.8% target share. That is also not getting it done. The 8 targets in week 5 sounds nice, but it was on 58 pass attempts. It's not like he's commanding 8 targets on 30 pass attempts. There was so much passing volume that if he completely flopped, it would have been painful. For him to have done nothing in this game, it would have been truly insane. 58 pass attempts, he was still number 4 in targets on this team. You had Drake London, you had Darnell Mooney, who's a Ray McLeod was out there, who I think commanded at least 9 targets in this game. So I don't think much has changed in my opinion of Kyle Pitts. I liked him heading into the year. I have him on a few of my rosters. So this is not me being a hater. I wanted to begin on Kyle Pitts, but I'm going to be trying to sell him off of my rosters. I want to move on at this point. The stat line was nice, but the underlying usage still is not all that ideal, just in terms of him commanding targets and actually producing moving forward. So some potential trade targets here. I think a guy like David Njoku, coming off an injury could be interesting, even though that Browns offense is just terrible. At least I think he can command volume on a team that's been pass heavy, even if the yardage hasn't been there. I think for a guy like Cooper, it's tougher because the wide receiver bar is obviously higher. But if Njoku can command a lot of volume, he can PPR his way, even if the touchdowns and overall yardage isn't there. Pat Freiermuth, I would take at this point. TJ Hawkinson, maybe a team can't wait around for his injury. They need someone to plug and play. I'd love to take Hawkinson. Tucker Kraft, probably unlikely after the game he had Sunday, but maybe they're a believer in Kyle Pitts. They think Tucker Kraft, his production's kind of fluky. So those are some targets. I just think if you can upgrade at the tight end position, I don't think this is a sign of Kyle Pitts turning things around. Now, I would love to be wrong. I kind of hope he figures it out and continues to ball out moving forward, but this one game just isn't going to sell me on it, and I do think it's a good opportunity to sell high. So those are going to be some of my sell high candidates heading into week 6. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.